President Yoon Suk-yeol partakes in the South Korea-ASEAN Summit, as well as the ASEAN +3 Summit, and a number of bilateral engagements in Laos this week, as he joins his global counterparts in efforts to promote economic interests while hoping for geopolitical stability. On today's edition of Press Perspective, we touch upon the importance of regional interaction for broader prosperity. Hello and welcome to our third edition of Press Perspective this week. It's Thursday, October 10th here in South Korea, and I'm Sun-hee. Today we touch upon the latest events regarding efforts to ensure regional and global stability and prosperity under the ASEAN framework and more. For this, I have Celio Fioretti, a correspondent for French daily Croix, here in the studio. Celio, it's a pleasure.
Glad to be here.
I also have Nicholas Fang, the Director of Security and Global Affairs at the Singapore Institute of International Affairs, live on the line. Nicholas, it's also a pleasure to have you with us.
Good afternoon. Hi, everyone.
Right, Celio, we'll start here in the studio. Some say the ASEAN region is the world's economic dark horse. Now, speaking within your capacity as a member of the French press, what do you say?
I think it's true. Southeast Asia is a region often overlooked and for its potential and overshadowed by the economic powerhouses in the region like China, Japan and South Korea. Yet in recent years it has been rapidly evolving to a promising economic hub. The GDP growth rate in the region was around 4.6 last year, and where in Korea it was 1.3. So you can see it's really booming a lot these later years. Southeast Asia has become has some major advantages compared to the industrial but slower growth-paced countries as Korea or Japan. As a young and growing population, so it's something we lack now in the north of Asia, with a combined population exceeding 650 million people. ASEAN demographic power stands as a formidable driver for its economic rise. The demographic dividend with a youthful population creates a favorable context for business development, economic achievements too. Now, population itself is not enough to do all the job. What they need is innovation in industry. On that, they are investing a lot on research and development, around $34 billion in 2020. Also, the reduced labor cost in the region attracts foreign investment and foreign companies. Korea, for example, has invested a lot with companies like Hyundai or LG in Vietnam and Indonesia to access strategic resources that they would need for EV batteries, for example, or semiconductors. However, with the fast-paced economic development comes some strong inequalities of wealth in the region. So I think that's the biggest challenge now for ASEAN to ensure a fair access to health, education to all of its population, not only in the cities, but also in the rural areas. And also, another biggest challenge for the region is the environment. A stronger industry cause also a stronger impact on the carbon footprint. So I think they really had to think about how to overcome these challenges in the future with for example, the Mekong River in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. It's the breadbasket of all the population here. So it needs to be protected to ensure the economic sustainability growth.
Right, and against that backdrop, Nicholas, South Korea, it's hoping to play a bigger role in Southeast Asia. And a former Indonesian diplomat in an opinion piece for Asia Times called for more commitment by South Korea to security in South China Sea, should it seek to play a more tangible role in the region. That being said, Nicholas, to what extent can Korea's presence in Southeast Asia be expanded, do you think?
Well, first and foremost, I think security, stability, and peace within the region is a critical success factors for Southeast Asia to fulfill its potential that Celio was talking about just now. And I think that we, as residents of Southeast Asia, are hoping for all partners, international and otherwise, to play a constructive role in contributing to the security, stability, and broader peaceful environment in this region. So it's very heartening to hear President Yoon talk extensively about wanting to contribute more for South Korea to play a bigger role in terms of defense cooperation with ASEAN. And he has touched on possibilities such as more participation in multinational exercises and training for ASEAN forces. Here in Singapore, the Singapore Armed Forces, for example, train a lot and partner a lot with international counterparts and stakeholders in terms of training and capability development. Now, South Korea ranks as ASEAN's 5th most active security partner behind the US, China, Japan, and Australia. So there is potential to increase this, potentially by shifting away from primarily multinational engagements, which is historically how it's often happened. And we see South Korea participating quite often alongside the US. The country could consider more bilateral or sub-regional cooperation with partners in ASEAN to achieve that. Now, at the same time, when it comes to defense procurement and the South Korean defense industry, President Yoon, is no secret, is hoping for Korea to become, the ROK to become the world's 4th preeminent defense exporter by 2027. And we see a lot of examples of collaboration in Southeast Asia. For example, Indonesia is co-developing the KF-21 fighter jet with South Korea. Malaysia has signed a deal for the FA-50 Fighting Eagle aircraft. And Thailand and Philippines have also become repeat buyers of South Korean defense equipment. So there is a potential to grow this aspect as well. And lastly, I think there's great potential for collaboration with ASEAN on non-traditional security issues, which are becoming increasingly a concern. These include cybersecurity, transnational crime, maybe even information operations. And President Yoon has touched on some of this during his visit to Singapore. So I think we're looking at a lot of these areas as potential security collaboration efforts. But also, as President Yoon has mentioned, economic and climate cooperation are areas that have a lot of potential and are very closely aligned with ASEAN's own priorities. So I think all these areas present a lot of potential.
And that being said, Nicholas, would you say that the Yoon Suk-yeol administration at present, its efforts, are they on track to ensuring such a productive, perhaps, expansion in the Southeast Asian region?
I think if you listen to what President Yoon has talked about, the agreements that he has signed with Singapore, for example, there is definitely a lot of impetus and desire on the part of the ROK to do more with ASEAN partners. I think critically we'll have to see how the broader geopolitical environment develops. The ROK, of course, has its own priorities and own focus areas pertaining to unification on the Korean Peninsula, economic growth domestically as well. So I think it's going to be about balancing the priorities, but it is very heartening to hear President Yoon, on his first state visit to Singapore and in his participation with other regional summits this past week, show a lot of desire and interest to deepen the collaboration across a range of areas in this part of the world.
Right, indeed. And Celio, back here in the studio, diplomacy in recent times, it appears to bind together security and economic partnership. That being said, how do you assess Korea's economic partnerships with its regional partners at present?
First, I think we have to remember that Korea is the second dialogue partner with whom ASEAN has forged a free trade agreement back in 2005. According to ASEAN data, bilateral trade between ASEAN and Korea reached $156 billion in 2019, so it's not something small. Through the implementation of the free trade agreement, ASEAN has much to benefit from Korea's advancement in manufacturing technology and digital technology also. And a closer cooperation in this regard will boost ASEAN position in the regional production network, as it will also better prepare the region for its industrial transition. Companies like LG, Hyundai, also Samsung have implemented factories, especially in Vietnam. And for now, Korea is mostly focusing on Vietnam and Indonesia, but Korea should also look at the other countries. I think it's also a promising look for them, especially in terms of resource and access to resource there. We can also note that tourism is a major force for the economy between Korea and ASEAN. With the success of K-culture in the Southeast Asia, many tourists come every year to Seoul to visit. And also, every year, many Koreans go to the warm beaches of Vietnam or Thailand. So I think there should be like more to develop on that side. But more on the diplomacy, ASEAN has become a key player in Korea's diplomacy. While the ASEAN ROC political and economic cooperation expanded over the last years, defense is still quite small. It's still like burgeoning. It's the beginning. So there is everything to be done there. I think they should start with maybe more institution, making more partnership between ROC Army, or create a better structure for maybe some training together. There are some fields, as Nicholas mentioned just before, field of cooperation that could be interesting for Korea and ASEAN. Maritime security is a major issue in the region with the Southeast China Sea. So I think with the experience of the ROK Navy and the issues needed there, I think there would be an interesting cooperation there. Also on the cybersecurity, South Korea prides itself to be really advanced in the field, and Asian countries are tech savvy and interested in that field. So I think that would be also another axis of cooperation. Finally, of course, as we mentioned before, the defense industry, and with the goal of Korea to become a major exporter in the world. The Philippines has been already a major client of Korea, with Hanwha helping to build the Philippine Navy. Vietnam would also be interested in that, I think. So yeah, on the defense industry, there's a lot of cooperation to make with ASEAN.
Right. And Nicholas, the ASEAN +3 summit brings together South Korea, Japan and China as well. What look to be the gains on both the diplomatic and economic fronts for South Korea from ties with Southeast Asian nations as compared to those by its East Asian neighbors, namely China and Japan, of course?
Well, before we come to that, I just wanted to highlight that I certainly hope more South Koreans come to Singapore also for tourism. We have maybe not as nice beaches, but we have interesting tourism, entertainment. And we also have a new plant by Hyundai to manufacture electric vehicles in Singapore. So I think we can definitely see, as Celio was sharing, much greater opportunities for deeper collaboration. On the ASEAN +3 summit, I think it's an interesting forum insofar as that this high-level trilateral dialogue process restarted in May this year after a 4-year pause due to COVID and other political issues. A key aspect of this summit is that it is ASEAN and not the 3 Northeast Asian powers that convenes it. And this provides a regular regional platform for the dialogue that can happen regardless of broader geopolitical concerns in the region and globally. So it gives that kind of consistency and definitely a more constant avenue for engagement. Another key reason is that, this summit obviously brings ASEAN members to the table. We've already heard about the size of the ASEAN economy, and while China, Japan, and South Korea individually have larger GDPs than any ASEAN country, the collective GDP of ASEAN as a whole is $3.6 trillion US. That's comparable to Japan or Germany and over twice the size of South Korean GDP. So ASEAN is a significant trading partner and market for South Korea for sure. And if you look beyond trade to perhaps investment, South Korean foreign direct investment into ASEAN has surged under President Yoon. From the year he took office, the annual investment in ASEAN nearly doubled from US $7 billion to $13 billion. And the cumulative investment in ASEAN is around $150 billion US, and this could exceed $200 billion within the next 5 years. So again, when you talk about the opportunities and the potential from where we are today and where we could be in 5-10 years' time, the opportunities are significant. And it's heartening to see that different ROK administrations are consistently interested in looking at how to develop greater trade and investment links with Southeast Asia. And I think the region is certainly looking forward to growing these opportunities with South Korea as well.
And staying with those opportunities, Nicholas, what were some of your takeaways from the deal sealed between South Korea and Singapore during President Yoon Suk-yeol's state visit earlier this week?
Well, it's very exciting because, as we've heard, Singapore and South Korea will be celebrating 50 years of diplomatic ties next year. Coincidentally, I will be 50 next year as well, so that has some significance for me. And both countries have agreed to enter into a strategic partnership by next year to elevate the ties to a strategic partnership. So when we look at the agreements that were signed by the two leaders during President Yoon's visit to Singapore, the supply chain partnership agreement to enhance resilience of critical sectors, I felt that was very important because this creates a crisis response network that will facilitate emergency meetings between the two countries within 5 days of detecting supply chain disruptions. If we look at the past few years, we have seen how different types of events, whether it's natural disasters or military conflicts between countries, can cause supply chain disruptions around the world. So to have this mechanism signed between the two leaders, Prime Minister Lawrence Wong in Singapore and President Yoon, of course, I think was a really major step forward. The MOU on liquefied natural gas cooperation that covers areas such as LNG swaps, joint purchases, and information sharing will be very important as we continue to talk about sustainable, clean energy sources and sustainability, even in the event of crisis and other sort of disruptions. And then the agreement to strengthen collaboration on startups and cutting-edge technology sectors, which the ROK in South Korea is a global leader on, I think has a lot of very interesting benefits for a country like Singapore. And I think all of us in Singapore are quite excited to see how things develop, not just in the build-up to 2025, but in the years ahead as well.
Right. And Celio, back to the ASEAN framework. Can the ASEAN, do you suppose, play a productive role in easing tensions on the Korean Peninsula?
Of course it can. What is interesting with ASEAN is that it is maintaining relationship with both North and South Korea. The DPRK, North Korea's official name, has 8 embassies in ASEAN countries. This demonstrates a certain level of closeness between the regime and those countries. Some, like Cambodia or Malaysia, even share a visa-free entry for North Korean citizens. ASEAN also has trade with North Korea, although it's rather small, couple $100 million every year, but still existing. On the other hand, as we mentioned earlier, ASEAN and South Korea have deep economic ties. And so it is in the best advantage of the region to work for the peace and stability of the region. How it can do that? Well, in 2017, ex-President Moon Jae-in called with his new South policy for ASEAN to play a better role into promoting peace and stability in Asia, but especially on the Korean Peninsula. And a few months after that, Singapore hosted the Kim-Trump Summit, which was an important landmark for negotiation on the Korean Peninsula. So it shows that ASEAN can be a place for negotiation and discussion for the two Koreas. And the DPRK seems to trust ASEAN in its neutral stance between the two countries. I think that is the way ASEAN can help for peace on the Korean Peninsula, becoming a neutral middleman between the two Koreas to ensure better negotiation with both China, America, but also now Russia, which is becoming a major player in the region. So also ASEAN should be careful to not be dragged onto one side or another, which can be difficult because there's economic gain maybe standing with China or with the US. But if it keeps being neutral and keeps being a way to open discussion, I think that's one way ASEAN can play a role for the peace and stability of the region.
Right. And staying with the same subject matter, Nicholas, what are your thoughts with regard to the role that South Korea's ties with the ASEAN can play to promote a nuclear-free Korean peninsula?
I thought it was very interesting because President Yoon gave a lecture in Singapore yesterday, which I managed to attend, and the title was I think meaningful. He was speaking about a vision for Korean unification toward a free, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. So he was sort of bringing together these two ideas of unification, hopefully peaceful unification with the North, and how this could actually contribute to a more free, more prosperous, peaceful, and stable Indo-Pacific region, of which, of course, ASEAN is part of. So I think if you look at alignment, ASEAN has great alignment with the South Korean view about nuclear weapons. since the 1990s, ASEAN has had a Southeast Asian nuclear weapon-free zone treaty, where all ASEAN countries have pledged to not develop or otherwise acquire nuclear weapons. And ASEAN ministers have also regularly released statements that express concern about North Korea's missile testing and nuclear weapons program. North Korea does participate in ASEAN regional platforms. It is part of the ASEAN Regional Forum process, which is really one of the few international summits that North Korea attends. So there's some prospect of ASEAN playing a supporting role in dialogue with North Korea, or at least providing a platform or venue for engagement, as Celio said, because there is that view about ASEAN's neutrality and its ability to offer this very neutral, safe platform for engagement with the North as well. So depending on what happens in the US in November, whether we'll see Trump-Kim Part 2, maybe in Singapore, or even should the new administration come in and want to engage with the North, I think all of us in ASEAN would be quite eager to see how we could play a constructive role in that sort of scenario.
Right, a role hopefully that will ease tensions here on the Korean Peninsula. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Nicholas, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, that was Nicholas Fang, the Director of Security and Global Affairs at the Singapore Institute of International Affairs, and Celio Fioretti, a correspondent for French daily Le Croix. Thank you very much for your time and thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this edition for Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. See you same time on Friday.